This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Debbie Weiss. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'll let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You see that icon up there says listen on Newsly. And for our listeners, if they use the coupon code GHOST, they can get 1 month free premium subscription. So later tonight, we will be on Newsly as an audio only version of the podcast. And we're on many other platforms too, but you can check that out. And I want to thank you again for being on the show. We're actually at episode 973 of the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast today. And we'll get back to your website. For those of you who are listening on audio, we do have your website up, debbieweiss.com, and that will be fully clickable when we're fully published. So maybe you can tell the folks if they click on that, what would they find there?
Sure. So first, I have to correct you because it's debbieweiss.com. I wish I could have gotten debbieweiss.com, but somebody grabbed it first. So it's Debbie R. Weiss. And there's everything there. There's a wait list for my coaching program. You can click on information about purchasing my book. You can see all other information about me and my social media platforms and just all the things about me. Everything is there. That's the hub.
That's great. So thank you for the correction. Yeah, it does say R. I just missed that. Sorry. And want to let people know that we also have your topic today that we were going to talk about, is like shifting your mindset. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on. And maybe you can kind of give some background, maybe as you know, tell the audience a little bit about yourself as an author, and then maybe we'll focus on shifting your mindset as the topic.
Sure. So I've recently published my memoir, On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. And it is a compilation of stories of my life, with the first part being stories about my childhood and kind of how I developed my own set of limiting beliefs, as many of us do develop. And then some of the challenges in part two that kind of forced me to look those beliefs in the face. And part three is kind of, a evolving journey, but an aha moment that I had that made me realize that all I really need to do in order to change my life is to start changing my thoughts. And once I realized that, that's literally opened up a whole new world to me.
Yeah, the mind is very powerful. Because in my life, I actually had when I was age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma, and I'm 56 now. And I had a mindset that, I wasn't going to get depressed about it. I thought very positive about it. I started to investigate what did it mean, right? I actually
Yeah.
started to research like what it was. And so that was very good because I had some choices the doctors were giving me. And if I hadn't read up on what was going on and just trusted the first doctor, I might not be here because I got multiple opinions. And I also set a goal for myself when I was sick that started to build a mountain bike as I was going through this cancer. And I said, when I'm done, I'm going to take this bike on the trail and use it to get back in shape. And I actually kept that focus. So I think a lot of what you could be a victim of something, or you could try to think of a positive outcome. And I tried to create like the most positive point of view that I could in a bad situation.
Which is amazing, especially at that age, and certainly at that age in particular, such a reason to feel like a victim, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
were you always a positive person like that? Did you always have that kind of ability to focus like that?
I think I think I was a little pessimistic at age 26, but then what I discovered is that I had some limiting beliefs. Right, I had some things where I wasn't confident about public speaking. I wasn't confident about being in the front in the bands I was in. I'm a keyboardist. I was always in the back. And then post cancer, I started doing poetry readings. I started singing my own songs instead of giving them to singers. And I started to, get into podcasting and just, I ended up traveling to Japan. I all kinds of things that I felt before that I would have never done. I decided
Exactly.
that if I can survive that, that I should have a more positive outlook or try things that I was fearful of and kind of hit it head on. And you don't have to have a crucible moment, but you do have to kind of change your mindset. You have to have some
Definitely.
kind of thing that makes you do that. So I'd be interested in talking about like excuses that that some people reasons why you can't do something. I think sometimes when you go through a crucible moment, you find a way to get around it. But I don't think you have to. Everybody has to get cancer to make a
Right.
change in their life. So,
Let's hope not anyway, right? But that's amazing, especially at that age. Yeah, I didn't know it. That's the thing. I didn't really discover that truth until I was around 50. And when I was 50, I kind of had a bit of an aha moment where I realized that I had been living as the victim or having this victim mentality mindset my whole entire life. And I never realized, I never knew there was another way because I just didn't have enough awareness to like pull back and realize what I had been doing. To me, it was everyone else's fault. It was the
mm,
fault of a person or a fault of different circumstances and struggles that I faced in my lifetime. And I just assumed it is what it was. This is my journey. These are the crappy
mm,
things that happened to me. And what choice do I have? Like, this is my lot in life. And I'm just going to live it out until my days are over because what other option do I have? And when I realized, no, that's not true, it's an evolution, it's still evolving. And like I said, I kind of came to that when I turned 50. And in, I don't know, 3 weeks, 3 weeks from today, actually, I'm going to be 60. So it's been a
mm,
10-year evolution.
mm.
And, I don't think you ever stop evolving, or hopefully you don't ever stop evolving, right?
Yeah, I think it like even from 27, it is a constant evolution. Because one of the things I find is like people always want to know when you're done. It's like I don't think you're ever done. Like as an artist, like I'm never really finished until I can't play the keyboard anymore. Until I can't play the piano, it's like I'm not done. Right. And the way I
Yep,
look at it is um, the things you get scared of is like, oh, well, let me try something that I'm not that good at. And I think a lot of people have a struggle with that because they want to stay in the comfort zone, even if it's something that's like not good for. Like you could be in a codependency, but that's comfortable for you rather than trying to change. You could just say, well, all I want to do is play Chopin, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm never going to do anything else. And then he's like, well, you're kind
exactly.
of limiting your opportunities. Like like when you choose to do something that you're not the best at, you might fail at it. You might make mistakes. And what I look at is like happy accidents, the way I look at it as a producer, to me create some of the best music that you can make instead of trying to strive for perfection. That when you actually let go and trust yourself and willing to put something down that's not perfect, that a lot of those times is like the third or fourth take is better than the 100th take. What I found is
Exactly.
like that a lot of people are not willing to deal with that. They're like, well, they'll never show anybody or they won't go forward with it unless it's something that totally, to me, is like it loses a lot of its authenticity. Like when you try to spend all your time trying to make it perfect.
A and is there perfect? Like, perfection just doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And I think what you said about, you know, stepping out of your comfort zone, that is the hardest thing to do, or at least for me, it was the hardest thing to do and still is difficult. But now I know, just like you said earlier, when you started public speaking and doing poetry readings and doing all those things, your whole world changed, right? Because you opened yourself up to all these opportunities that you never would have if you just stayed in your safe little cocoon of a comfort zone. And when you try new things, I think especially as we get older too, right? Like you're a musician and you've been doing it your whole life, so you're really good at it. When you try something new, you forgot what it's like to be a beginner, right? We all forget because now chances are we've got something that we're pretty good at or we've been doing for a living or as a hobby or whatever. And, we have to think back to we were once a beginner at that too. And what did that feel like? And look at where you are now. And that never would have happened if you hadn't walked through your fear and given it a try.
Yeah, I think it's like the I can't, you have to switch that, like you said, to I can. And a lot of people, it's like they don't realize it's not really somebody else that's stopping them. It's like you are stopping yourself. I always like the Victorian poets because they talk about the looking glass, right? A lot of the poets from like you think about I don't know Longfellow, Hawthorne, Lord Byron, Wordsworth. They were all talking in this idea of like self reflection
Hmm.
and the things that you're kind of scared, and they used to put all kinds of layers on it to be indirect, right? But then you kind of could go through it and see what they're really talking about. And I always thought that that was, unweaving their layers and trying to get to the core truth. I was like, wow, that's what if you didn't have the layer and just went right direct to what exactly you want to talk about. So I started really studying that and trying to be more authentic and going for stuff that was like less layered, less masked, less have it, and that's harder to do because then people like, oh, wait, is this song really about you? Then you're kind of
Yeah.
putting things out there, and songwriters can kind of like to be authentic, you have to give a lot of yourself, and then you could get hurt because it is a lot of you. So you have to kind of have a certain level of an armor to handle the criticism.
Yeah, that's, funny you should say that because when I was writing it, like I said, my book is a memoir. uh, The things are deeply personal. They're stories, some that even my closest friends and family didn't know. And that's scary as anything to put that out there and realize that people are reading this and like seeing me, seeing my inner thoughts that I didn't share with anyone. We all have these things that go through our heads. And like I said, even with our closest loved ones, you're not sharing every thought. But in this book, I tried to be honest and, write what I was thinking in the moment. And, it's funny when I was writing it. Now, obviously, I was writing it with the idea that someone was going to read it, but I don't think that the connection really
Mhm.
struck me until I went and I recorded the audiobook.
Oh
And
man,
I was in a closed sound booth and I couldn't see. It was like to me, younger guys, like maybe 30. And I had just finished recording something really personal. And I open up the door and they're just both standing there staring at me. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this feels awkward.
yeah,
And that at that moment, I realized what I was actually doing.
yeah.
And it was scary, and it still is scary, even with, some acquaintances and stuff in town. They're like, "Oh, you wrote a book. I can't wait to read it." And I'm thinking, do I really want you to be reading that? I don't know."
Yeah, that's like when you first start, if you are a musician, you have to deal with your producer and recording engineers, and you get really personal. It's kind of like that booth moment because like you go and you put something down and you're kind of in the moment. Like we get into this, like I'm in the flow state or I'm in that
Yes.
stream of consciousness. I kind of get in a zone and I'm not really
Yep.
paying attention to other people, and then suddenly they come out like, oh, and then you
Oh.
got your recording engineers like looking at you like, is that true? Is that what it is? Things like, well, I'm an artist. Come on. So
Yeah.
you kind of play it off, but it's like, it is like when you start to reveal that, and you say, well, how's my best friend when I was like 10 years old going to take this? How's my mom or my
Yes.
grandma? How they going to take it? So it's like, but you like as an artist and an author, and I've talked to a lot of people who are like creators. That is like the first step of getting that into reality, getting something out of your head, in your heart, and putting it out as a piece of work. That
Right.
that a lot of times is the stuff that stops people. You know, they stop because they're like, oh, I don't want to show anybody this. And I've run into artists. They're like the best song they have, they don't want to put out. Right, the best song because it's too personal, it's too raw. And then I'm like, as a producer, I'm kind of like, you gotta. This is the one. All these other ones are nowhere near what this is. And there a
Exactly.
lot of times people are very scared of that. Even people who've been doing it for a long time. It's like the one song is like you got to push them. Sometimes they're like, it's like, yeah, that's it. That's it right there.
But let's face it, that's what the audience wants, right? I mean, that's what they want. They wanna know you. They want that authenticity, and that's where you're gonna connect with other people when you're vulnerable. But it's still super
It's
scary.
hard.
But that's what pushed me. I had one story in my book that wasn't originally in my book because it was something that I was extremely ashamed about, that really nobody else knew. Maybe one other person in my life knew about 80% of it, but other than that, no one knew anything. And I didn't have it in there. And one day I actually, I don't know, maybe I was either meditating or something, and something popped into my head that was something like, you have to you have to tell it. You know, you have to tell it. And I reminded myself, what's the reason I'm doing this in the first place, right? And it is to let other people know there's another way, regardless of what's happening. And if I don't put everything out there that was truly going on, maybe then I wouldn't be connecting with someone that I might have if I didn't reveal this story. It was about money. So if there might be people out there who are thinking, oh, yeah, but she has no idea. Easy for her to say, right? She has no idea what I'm going through or what my money situation is. Or, it was just one more level of connection around a topic that I think is typically shameful,
Mhm.
if you don't handle money in a good way or you find yourself in a position that, whatever it is. And I thought, I've got to do it because otherwise, I don't want to say I'm a fraud, but I'm not I'm
Yeah,
not being
authentic.
completely honest with myself or my audience.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the authenticity thing. That I always talked about, like with an honesty, because a lot of people will try to just clone what's popular or clone what they think people expect. So they'll parrot what the face that, or they, people have these masks. You put on a mask, and that's the public face that everybody sees, and that's what people are used to. And then suddenly, if you actually show them who you really are, because you finally get to the point where you want to tell the truth. There's some people they maybe can't handle that because they like the 25-year-old version of
Yeah.
yourself, and you were always using that mask, and then you finally take it off, and then they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I like this person.
Yeah. I
But
didn't know that about them.
yeah, so it was like there's always like a risk, but there's also like benefits of people that you're gonna find. It's gonna the law of attraction. I think once you start to reveal like what's been holding you back, then things you get opportunities. Like for
Absolutely.
everything that like seems like a negative, there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of things like once you come to terms with that, it's like therapy. Like a lot of what I do with music is it's like it's total therapy,
Yep.
therapeutic to be an artist and actually put something out, put it down, and then it's kind of there. And then I put it out there, and then I got to handle it and figure out how to shape it into something that's like artistic. But I think that's the moment when you realize that you can use that. And I've talked to a lot of therapists. It's like, well, art therapy is a very positive thing to show people how to. They've been very closed, and they don't want to take that they don't want to reveal that, but you can get them to do it through painting, photography, or journaling, or then people was like, oh, I want to write a book, or I want to paint this painting, or I want to write this song, I want to do get into acting, and then kind of take that and channel that feeling, the feelings into like acting, doing theater somewhere. And it's a lot of that capability that people have. Like everybody can be creative. It's not you don't have to be Orson Welles. You don't have to be, somebody big. Stephen King. You don't have to be that to be human. All human beings are creative, and a lot of people are told like only the masters can do it, and
Oh
that's not
my
true.
oh my goodness. I have so many thoughts on that. So I couch myself as not creative at all my whole entire life. I'm like a numbers girl. My brain is whatever that is, right or left side. I don't remember. That's where I am. And I can't paint a picture and I can't, I love music, but I can't make it. And God knows I can't sing it, even though I try. And nothing, like just no artistic ability. And I wasn't comfortable with journaling, writing. I mean, in college, I if it said that there were papers involved, I was doing whatever I could not to take that class. And so when the concept of journaling, which I've heard but never was interested in, when I finally did start several years ago, the only way I could do it was with a journal that had prompts because the thought of staring at a blank piece of paper was so incredibly intimidating, but I never tried it. So I just said, I can't do that. So I needed something with prompts. So I started with that. Okay. I felt a little uncomfortable. I felt like someone was going to grade me on my journal. And but I got that down. And then about a year and a half ago, I must have been listening to a podcast and they were talking about the benefits of free form journaling, looking at that blank piece of paper, just writing down stream of consciousness. And, I wish I could remember what they said the benefits were that really drew me to thinking, oh, just give it a try. And I sat down with the blank piece of paper. And once I wrote one sentence, I was absolutely amazed how I was off and running. And 4 pages later, my whatever I was writing went from, it's a sunny day to some deep, dark feeling I didn't even know I was having. And I was blown away by the whole experience and could not believe how great it felt, how I don't know, satisfying or just
Yeah,
like you said, it was such therapy and I started doing it every day. And that is actually what started me on saying other people had been saying, "Oh, you really should write a book. You should write a book." And I would always say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," but I didn't really mean it. And it was that made me think, I don't know. I mean, maybe I can do this. Maybe people
yeah.
would be interested in what I have to say. But it all started from journaling, and it was a complete form of therapy and something I was very closed off to forever.
Yeah, a lot of artists that I deal with, by being an artist, a lot of what I like is I'm not. I mean, I can read sheet music, but I'm not really into it because
Mhm.
I'm a creator. So what I like to do is that flow state, that stream of consciousness, and I find as I get older, and I read a lot about some of the great people like Hendrix and Morrison and Neil Young and Frank Zappa. They all believed in this kind of flow state, stream of consciousness. Just put the recorder on, just put the track on, and just play. And if you do that, and you trust yourself, you'll find that all these deep things just come out. It's like the idea the Victorians had about the muse, that
Mm,
as artists we can channel. I think all human beings can kind of channel into that muse or the universe. And it sounds kind of hippie thing, but it's true. Like we a lot of writers will find, yeah, you can do the flow chart. I mean, you can do the outline, but when you're in that flow state and you just start putting something down, it is very significant the things that you can come up with that without all the planning. Not that you don't do planning, but there's a lot that can come from that stream of consciousness. And even if you have a set arrangement as an artist, I can have a set arrangement. But if I kind of go with what my flow state gives me, I might change that arrangement because I came up with something better. But so I don't have to be tied to it. And that's where people kind of get, they think they got to be tied to their structure. And a lot of art is very unstructured. And it comes from like subconsciousness, it comes from the external and internal, and this way that our brains can, and our artistic self or can do that. And some people just don't understand how it happens, but you don't have to all understand how it happens to actually do it. You can just get into it.
And it's amazing. I tell everyone, don't ever I try not to say anymore that I'm a numbers person because I'm shutting myself off to another whole side of myself that I didn't even know existed. And even with the art, I went to a spa and they had like, different art classes. And I got to tell you, I was petrified, like petrified. This is just for fun and relaxation, no judgment, free judgment zone. I walked into there like I don't know what I thought was going to happen to me. And, I felt like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to mix the paint and clean the brush. And I'm looking around to everybody else. I'm comparing myself, very bad thing, to
Mhm.
everybody else around me. And when I finally relaxed and said, Deb, you're going to bring this home and you can throw it in the garbage. Like, what do
Yeah.
you care? And I just got into it and got out of my head. I loved it. I thought, oh my goodness, here's another form of therapy, basically,
Yeah.
but in a creative way that I never felt that I possessed before or that I would enjoy. And there's nothing more exciting than discovering things about yourself you never knew existed.
Yeah, I think it's a journey a lot of people they come to because a lot of times as a kid, when you're very young, you might not have that limit. You might not have that limitation. You might say, "Well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this and do this," like because nobody's telling you you can't. Then as
Right.
you get older, people start saying, "Well, that's like, oh, being an artist, that's kind of childish, or that's not too optimistic, or like, why should you do that? It doesn't make money. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do that." Like, but the thing is, like, if it's heart satisfying, if it's soul satisfying, why not do it? And I found a way just to always integrate art. In my whole family, my daughter's a graphic artist. And I
Mm,
didn't tell her like, well, you got to go to college and go find something real because I
right.
respect that that's a real profession. She's an art director now. She does, she found a way to monetize it. But that wasn't the point. She just found a way to get into it because she loves it and she's doing what she loves. And my wife's like into, she's a public speaker and she writes her own memoirs and things. But we've been a very, art focused family, not thinking that it's a bad thing or
Yes.
it's something that that's not real or it's not something like, well, you shouldn't go to college for art. You need to go, get a degree in mathematics or be a lawyer or be a scientist. It's like, why not? Yeah, why? Because everything that's out there, there's some art to it. Madison Avenue, movies, film. There's tons of art in everything. Even there's
Absolutely.
commercial art. And my daughter has done tons of things that are commercial art, things like logos and all kinds of like backgrounds and stuff for companies. But yeah, you don't always have to do that, but it's something you pay the bills. But you can find a way to make art part of your life without feeling guilty about it. I think a lot of people feel guilty if they're doing it because they say, well, it's a waste of time because they've been told it's a waste of time and it's not.
I couldn't agree more. And like you said, they're doing something they love. You're all doing something that you love. My youngest son is a junior in college now. And I just keep trying to tell him he's so worried about, you know, how's he going to pay the bills? How much money is he going to make? And I have to say, he's very similar to me, in the kind of I'm a numbers guy thing. That's kind of his brain is a little bit like that too. So it's not like he has any of those other passions he doesn't really know. They're undiscovered. But I
Mhm.
still feel like I hate to see you get pigeonholed or pigeonhole yourself into something. without really exploring things that maybe aren't the biggest money makers in the world. But you know what? Money isn't the end all be all. If it brings you happiness and fulfillment, what else do you want in life? I mean,
Yeah,
not
because
much
sometimes
else.
your passion sometimes can bring things to you. It's like the law of attraction. Like if
Yes.
you're into something and you're so positive about it, then when you believe in yourself, then other people start to believe in you, right? So if you doubt yourself, then you're gonna probably not gonna actualize. But if you fully self-actualize what you really want to do, then you see people become entrepreneurs. They become business people. They take their arts and they sell it on eBay or whatever. They get into what they really want to do, and they could have been doing 9 to 5, and they didn't like it. And people told them they should like it, and then they found out they didn't like it. It's like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. You find a way to you have your passion. And a lot of times today, like people can brand themselves. You
Yes.
can go and create your own brand. And that's kind of like the future, like with AI and all these things. Like, people are scared about the jobs going away. It's like, well, you're going to be like controlling your own job.
Yeah.
You're going to create your own brand. You're going to create your own thing. That's kind of hard. It's scary. It's going to be scary for a lot of people, but it's kind of like the future state of humanity is being able to be more self-determinant, of what you can
Yep.
do.
Yeah. Building your own brand. I'm in the middle of that now, and it's interesting and scary and fun and exciting all at the same time, and something that, yeah, was kind of new to me, because when I think about building my own brand, it just makes me think of either celebrities or, right, or, influencers. And which,
It's like,
being 60, I'm like, what's an influencer? Why are they influencers? And how'd they get to be influencers? I don't even really understand it, but I guess now I'm starting to understand. And, it's a whole new world, but it is exciting. And when I first got started a couple years ago, heading in this direction, I was heading in a kind of a little bit of a different direction, and then auto corrected, and I was not self branding. And I think the thing that's nice about self branding is that life is going to take us in different paths. And no matter what path we go down, if you self brand, you're still yourself, right? You still have the same brand with anything else that you do under that brand of you.
yeah, I think sometimes you start with a narrow focus, or some people start like very expansive and then they get narrow.
Yeah.
I kind of started, with the whole idea of this Phantom Electric. It's a band. It's a music. I'm a music producer, and then I said, well, somebody came to me and said they wanted to interview me on a podcast in 2016. I said, what's that? I didn't know what it was, but I said, okay, I'll do it. Right. I went on the podcast with a guy named Rock Tunes. We liked each other so much that we ended up doing a podcast for the next 6 months, and we had not planned that. It just kind of happened. And then I said, wow, this is actually pushing people into my brand, into my Spotify, into my iTunes. And I said, wow, this actually works pretty good. So I started interviewing bands. Then I started interviewing authors and poets and then photographers. And then I started, going into life coaches and CEOs, and it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Went from audio to video.
Yep.
And then suddenly this thing that was a hobby became like a side gig, and it wasn't totally planned. But what I think what you have to do is sometimes you have to be willing to see something that you didn't even realize could be an opportunity, and not just say no. I think a lot of people look at something and they say no because they never did it, and they're not going to even entertain it. And I think you have to have the kind of mindset to be, if something comes along, are you going to reject it or are you going to accept it?
And then obviously you discovered you liked it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was something that, brought you joy too, just to do. I mean, I started my own podcast back in May. And the thing that I love best about it is exactly this, is getting to meet people that I would never have otherwise met. And it amazes me that I can talk to anyone in the world like this. And why would I have ever gotten an opportunity to meet people? I never would have gotten an opportunity to meet you and have this conversation, right? I mean, it's incredible. everybody that I meet is amazing.
Yeah, it's the one thing that I've been doing these like over 900 episodes, and I've met like initially I met like 300 musicians, a couple Grammy award-winning producers, and I never thought I would actually reach people like that, you know.
Yeah,
And it was just suddenly you just because I show up, because I'm consistent, I started getting the kind of known for a live interview. My live interview is my thing, and I tried having scripted, controlled, taped, really heavily edited interviews, and it wasn't me. I was like,
yeah,
"No, that doesn't work. I don't wanna do that because 'cause I'd rather do it like a real live, like, radio interview that was
yeah,
done live," kinda what I grew up with, people doing stuff live, and I'm like, "That's what I like," and it's like, why do they do Saturday Night Live live? Because there's something
right.
about when you do something live, it's like you have that one shot to do it. It's very authentic, and people are gonna be that's what it is. That's who you are at that moment. That's what you're talking about. I find that very dynamic, and even you can't control everything. You have to let go of some of the things. Some people can't let that go, and that's why they don't do it. But but
Yeah, true.
it's a certain thing you have to be willing to let go.
Hey, that's the best part of Saturday Night Live is when they mess up or they laugh, right?
Yeah.
Or they break
Yeah, I mean,
character.
if you see a play, like an off-Broadway play, to watching an actor who's been doing film, they love doing those plays because it allows them to kind of perfect their craft, and they kinda live it's like a jazz musician, we play off the crowd, right? You
Yeah,
play off and if you're playing fusion and it's not it's kinda set, you know what you're gonna play, but you go off into a kinda cacophony or confusion and come back, and you
right.
kind of play off the moment. Like Herbie Hancock one time talked about this thing where he was playing with Miles Davis and he hit the wrong note. He looked at Miles and he thought Miles was gonna hate him. And Miles kind of like smiled and he just went off in a different direction based on the note he played. And then
Amazing.
after he was like trying to apologize to Miles, Herbie, and Miles said, "No, you don't need to apologize because that's what this is about. Like if you go and play something different, it helps me write a new song. That I'm not gonna look at it as a bad thing. That's like what we're in. We're in fusion. We're doing fusion. Fusion is about improvisational capability and being able to kind of recover from the so-called bad note.
Right.
And it's not necessarily a bad note because it gave me an idea.
It's amazing. I love that. I love that so much. So
That's where a
much.
lot of people have to think about that when they're writing. Is like, is that a bad thing to write about, or is that something like off the cuff thing that you get into? Is like, well, that wasn't planned, but that might be the thing that makes the whole project.
Exactly. That's the thing that makes it land with somebody. You just never know. You never know. You're right. When you're too planned and you're too scripted, and actually with my own podcast, that's what I found because for me, I tried it both ways, either when I was interviewing someone or when I was doing a solo episode. The solo episodes where, okay, yeah, I have the general topic that I'm going to talk about, and maybe I just have like a couple of bullet points, but that's it. And then I just talk, whatever comes to my
Mhm.
head, right? Like you said, that feels natural. But then I got in my head, oh, maybe I should make sure that I say these 5 things and I should have at least da 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 da. And now I had a whole outline where I basically had a piece of paper because I wasn't on video and I
Mhm.
had a piece of paper and you could tell I was reading. Or
Yeah.
even if you couldn't tell I was reading, it didn't sound natural. It didn't sound, it just didn't
Yeah,
land.
dynamic. Yeah, it's harder to land that unless you can, like, make people believe you're not reading it off the page, which is, like, what
Yeah,
actors can do.
exactly.
But not everybody's an actor, so it's like, if you're gonna do that, you gotta practice, like, some theatrical capability, and so
Yeah.
that's where it kinda comes in that, being your authentic self is not a bad thing, but a lot of people we've been kind of told in this age of like all these tools. We've got I got tons of digital control tools that can make my stuff sound perfect.
Yeah,
But
I'm
like they
sure.
have these things called quantizers. They'll fix my timing. But I think if I go back and I listen to like the Rolling Stones, they're not using quantification. They're letting Keith Richards is playing his chord arrangements in a very ramshackle way. doesn't really follow the meter, doesn't really follow a time. It's kind of like it's his own time. And
Okay.
today people want to be so precise that I find it boring. Because if I hear something that's like that, it's like it doesn't have a feel that's like a real human being did it because it's not. It's like coming off a machine. And
Yep.
that machine, some people can like it because it's very predictable. But I don't really like that because I want to
Mm,
hear somebody with the micro timing little differences
yeah,
that make you feel like that's authentic, that's real. And I
exactly.
think that's where there's always going to be a place where for human people playing. People say, "Oh, AI is going to replace all musicians." I just don't think so because there's something about a real human being. As an author, as a musician, as an actor, I don't think you're going to get AI replacing original human capability.
I
It can
I
do some things that are boring, maybe create stuff, but I don't know how much of that stuff people are going to like when they
I
start.
agree because when you know, I don't even know if it was I mean, I guess it was around, but I guess I wasn't aware when I was writing the book. But even now, when I write something and if I put it in there and it, changes it, makes it sound better because it uses better words and maybe the sentence structure is better. But I'm like, does that really sound like me?
Yeah,
No. And it's never going to sound like me and it's never going to sound like you and it's never going to be it's going to lack that
yeah.
authenticity that it's not going to be able to duplicate. And hopefully,
That's what you see
I
with, like,
think
with
over
what
time
yeah.
people will start to recognize that.
Well, you can see that with, like, famous writers, like Stephen King sometimes breaks rules because that's his style, and you'll see
Yep.
that, Hemingway kinda broke rules sometimes. There's a lot of classic writers, like, sometimes they broke rules because that was, like, their style, and it got accepted because it's like, "Well, they're big in the canon." Like, well, because they were able to force their own style, and it's like a lot of times in music, like, people break rules and create a new genre, like from
Mm.
bebop to
Yeah.
fusion.
Sure.
Bebop is considered like the standard jazz structure, but then fusion changed it and totally rewrote it. And then people say, "Well, that's not right." You had people saying, "Well, that's not real jazz," but now it's considered that is a real jazz form. So, like when you go, sometimes a lot of times if you go to a school like Berkeley or something, they'll teach you all the rules, and then the professor will say, "Well, you know what? You're going to end up breaking them. If you're going to be a creator, you're going to break a lot of these rules." Because in order to go forward, it's like that's what human beings do. We take these
Absolutely.
concepts and we break them, and it becomes something new. So you have to be willing to kind of be in the new frontier and try it.
It's so I don't even know why this was coming to my mind over the last couple of days. I was thinking to myself, I wonder what are we believing now as a universe that we're going to find out 10 years from now was absolutely ridiculous. And I just kept thinking about Christopher Columbus, maybe because it's going to be Columbus Day. I don't know. Like that everyone thought he was going to, sail off the end of the
Sure.
earth.
Yeah. Because that's what we
I
thought.
mean, I wonder how long it took for people to really accept
They did.
no, the world is round. And now look, we look back and be like, what do you mean sail off the end of of the earth? I don't know. It was I just pondered that the other day. Like I can't wait to see what is next. And I wonder how long it'll take us all to accept that, you
There's all
know?
kinds of ideas in science that get like new theorems get replaced all the time.
Right.
They find out like, well, you can't travel faster than light, and then somebody finds a way to do it,
Yeah,
right?
you can. Right.
You can.
Exactly.
It's like somebody's like so then it's like because you're thinking as a some people just think sequentially or just like what I can do fuel to burn without thinking like, what if you folded time? What if you
Yeah.
take point A and point B and then put them in the same spot? That's kind of like warping. It's a
Yeah.
science fiction idea, but the physics of it is like, well, that's how you do it. You don't do it through like all this jet fuel and trying to go as fast as possible. You can actually skip points. You can jump. The idea of jumping, that's like a physics idea, but it's actually getting closer to like actually
To
happening.
happening.
You
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are like, wow, even things like transporters from Star Trek, people have actually done experiments where they can move matter in a way that's similar to that. And they're like, wow, that was science fiction, but now you potentially could really do it. So there's a lot of ideas that go beyond what we can think just because you have to push the envelope of what you believe is possible. And there's things that human beings don't realize, because we don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. Think about the Jetsons, right?
Yeah,
I looked because I thought it was actually aired a little later than it did. I think it was either the late 50s or the very early 60s.
yeah,
And, I remember as a kid looking at that, talking to somebody on a screen and you see their face. Oh my gosh, that would be
okay,
amazing if I could talk to my
yeah,
grandparents who lived in another state and I could see them.
yeah,
That's ridiculous. That is so futuristic
yeah,
or, so many of the things. I think the only thing we don't have now are the, little rocket cars that drive around up there instead of,
yeah.
cars on the ground, but pretty much everything else on there, it's a thing nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, the limitations are only kind of like what I think people have to kind of live. This is an age where things happen so quickly, and the exponential capability of like science and
Yep,
mathematics and industry. We're gonna make these massive jumps that are getting ready to happen because of AI
yep,
and other things that they're looking at. And people have a lot of fear because they say, well, it's kind of like the horse and buggy age when the car comes. So
right.
everybody who was a blacksmith doing the horseshoes is like, well, I'm out of work. But then they had to learn how to do tires. So every job that kind of goes away, there's a new job that comes back. So
Absolutely.
people are kind of in this age where it's going to shift. And a lot of people say, well, I'm going to be left behind. So you're only left behind if you mentally feel like you can't change. I think that's where people need to kind of put their head is
Yeah, and
willing
that's
to
just
kind of,
exactly that's just what we started talking about in the beginning, right? People being afraid and changing their mindset and stepping through their fear. It's all of it. I don't think that, they're they're universal concepts that probably will never go away.
yeah. It's just like it's like that how your life kind of changes, right? Once you discover that you can do something that you thought you couldn't, right? Like then
Yes.
your daily life, I think people I've talked to on this program are the people who are actualizing, right? They're actualizing, they're becoming authors, entrepreneurs, business owners, artists, and they're making progress and they're connecting. And I think that is like that is what we do here. And that's why I love the podcast format because it does allow me to talk to people worldwide and different time zones, different places that are not possible. And that changes everything.
Yeah,
So I think this learning from other people is like you're constantly a student. And I think as a creative person, you realize that you never stop learning. You're not done.
that's right. Because if you stop learning, you are done.
Yeah, yeah. That's the big rub. But I do want to mention again your website. We didn't get it right this time, debbierweiss.com. That will be fully clickable when we're published. And so I like encourage people to click through on that. And maybe you can tell people again what they'd find there.
Sure. Pretty much everything about me, my book, my podcast, my coaching program, all my social media stuff, anything and everything you ever wanted to know.
That's awesome. And I do
Mhm.
encourage people to click through that. Right now you can't, but when we're fully published, like even on the Facebook live that we're on now, when it's fully published, which will be as soon as we're off the air, that will be clickable on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook, and then all the other
Wonderful.
places. So thank you again for being on the podcast. We always appreciate our guests coming on and encourage people to click on that link. And thank you, and I wish you good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.